RenderDoc is, a great tool. It's in almost every respect, actually. However, the problem is that it sort of requires you to launch a different program and start capturing your sort of the frames, etc. And that can sort of be a heavy process at times. It might be that you are able to figure stuff out differently at runtime. So one of the things that we looked at this year was that to look for tools, essentially, to help you debugging your program. And I found this amazing GUI library that I'll be talking about after this, which is called GUI, which allows us to, like, in a really simple ways, create quite complex GUI functionality, which are also really easy to integrate into your code base. And I sat down and looked at how we could create tools to sort of make use of that to make it easier for you to debug your applications. So you've already seen the sort of logging system and GL wrapping stuff that exists in the GFX header, I hope. Who is still not familiar with the GFX header from the labs? You. Okay. All of you are new. Okay. So all of you have seen the GFX info, etc. that exists in the labs. So that's part of it. The other part we're looking at is introspection tools, which is basically, are there ways that we can let you interact with OpenGL at runtime and inspect the variables inside OpenGL? And yeah, so I created a bunch of tools to functionality to allow you to look at your shader program at runtime and to look at your vertex array objects, your VAOs. So for instance, we can see here that I have a sort of shader program running that's currently just called program. And that program has a bunch of uniforms in there. So for instance, we have a uniform matrix, which we sort of multiply with the GL position. The cool thing is that we're also allowing you to, at least to a certain extent, manipulate those values. So, we can scale, etc.
For debugging purposes.
For debugging purposes, yeah. This is not supposed, you're not implementing stuff in this. And these tools have some limitations. For instance, if you're updating your uniforms every frame, then, every time you modify this, then you'll just be sort of writing that over with your own values. Because essentially what I'm doing is basically just going to ask your GPU, hey, how does this stuff look now? And then allowing you to edit that. But if you sort of overwrite that anywhere else, then that won't work. Similarly, you can sort of change textures, which looks really impressive in this demo because I only have one texture. But it's possible. And also colors. The cool thing is that these UI tools get pretty advanced pretty fast. So for instance, if we check this mark here, we can do color pickers. And pretty complicated color pickers. So yeah, one thing to note is that, I'll get back to the sort of GUI state. Just note that when you sort of click for getting colors for one of the objects, then that also sort of activates all the others. That's just a hack to get everything to work. Essentially, you're not allowed to say one uniform is a color and then none of the other are colors. Sorry, that's just not functionality that we sort of care about. Because that would, I've written these tools to be as easy to integrate with your code bases as possible, and to sort of do as minimal amount of processing as possible, or that's a lie, but not do extra memory allocations or do stuff that affects your architecture. So currently, to get all of this functionality, like being able to edit all your uniforms and also look at your actual shader code, because what we'll do here is that if you don't detach your shaders and don't delete them after you've created sort of your shader program, we will actually go, like this tool will actually go in and get out the shader source, so we can sort of see what code you actually have running on your GPU. Which is, quite good, because then, also as TAs, we can actually see what your shader code is doing, sort of while the program is running. So to get this, all of that functionality, as I said, I've tried to write it as simple to sort of implement as possible, and getting all of that, including like the color pickers, etc., is just that line of code. And what that line of code is doing is you just say sort of what do you want the shader program to be named in the UI, and then you give them or give it also the sort of shader program sort of identifier. And we also have the possibility of introspecting a vertex array. That's sort of, it's the same there, just what you call the UI, and then send in the vertex array object. And with that, you'll be able to get out the information about the element array buffer, again, assuming you're not running renderdoc, and being able to see the different attributes, like saying, we have the second buffer here, it's type float, it has 3 dimensions, it's 48 size in bytes, and how much stride have you set up for the object, and then what sort of usage is it, and what sort of like what's the actual contents of the buffers. Yeah. Are there any questions so far? Cool. So I said that you only needed sort of this piece of code. That's to a certain extent true. That's all you need to sort of get the functionality I showed you on screen. However, for this to work, you also need to depend on ImGUI, or their ImGUI. However, luckily that isn't really that hard. It's an open source library which contains like 5 files or something, and then you sort of just download that and put it into your application. Includes, let's say, just include the correct headers. So ImGUI's render sort of it's essentially independent of whatever render you're running in the background. So you can use ImGUI with Vulkan or DirectX or OpenGL. Because essentially, from my understanding, what does it that it sort of records everything you want to draw, and then it renders that on sort of a software renderer, and then it sends it off to the GPU. So what you need to get ImGUI to work is that you need to include the file, and then you also need sort of some wrappers for it. In this case, it's the since we're using GLFW, it's ImGUI impl GLFW, and also we're using OpenGL, 3 and above, so it's OpenGL free. You can find these files within ImGUI in examples. There they have sort of the implementation for GLFW and OpenGL, etc. But you need to include those, and when you've done that, the way you activate ImGUI is that you set up sort of the context and checking the version, etc. With these 2 lines, and then you initialize the wrappers. At the beginning of your frame, you call these 3 functions, saying that new frame on each of them, and at the end of the function, then you say you want to render it, and then you send it off to the render draw data in the implementation, and then you shut everything down at the end. So that's like 10 or 15 lines of code. But with it, you get sort of it comes with like extremely powerful stuff. As you saw, the GFX stuff, the like writing that GUI wasn't really that hard. But for those who has programmed in GUI before, it's a bit different way of thinking. But just to sort of show off, because the IMGUI has a demo window, so just to show sort of what sort of capabilities you can get. So, you know, you sort of get all the cool stuff. You can configure a bunch of the different colors, etc. that you want to use. You know, we have a classic mode, a light mode, a dark mode. You can like do everything from customizing padding, alignments, etc. But the really cool stuff is more the widgets that you have available. So you know, you have buttons and checkboxes and you know, different colored buttons, like draggable boxes, clickable boxes, multi-line text, scrollable sections, plots if you want to do that, so like average frame rates, etc. Loading bars. Like it's massively, it's like extremely functional in terms of features. Like it's a really great library, and it's used, from my understanding, it's used quite a lot in the especially in the games industry. So I know, for instance, Blizzard is like one of the sort of giant patrons that support this library. Yeah, color pickers, ranges, like child windows, pop-ups, everything. So, and the coolest thing is that you can use this to. It's also quite easy to use. So I thought I could just sort of give a quick demo of some of the functionality that we have sort of available. Just to sort of also show you how easy it is to work with. So what we'll do is that we'll just say, you know, if if we have a button, then we'll sort of output something to the terminal. So, you know, that's everything I needed to sort of set up a button. And as you can see here, now stuff gets printed out in the terminal. And that's like one line. And you can also do stuff like, you know, if we do let's see, IMGUI checkbox, and then so if we create a like is clicked object and then we make it static, now we sort of have a checkbox that we can sort of check on and off, and when we click it, it will also enter the if statements, so it sort of works when stuff changes. So yeah, that sort of just shows how easy it is to set up stuff, and this also can really help you in creating debugging tools for yourself. Because say that you want to create some, you have some sort of variable that's like for instance the camera distance, for instance. And you sort of want to work with finding, you want to work with trying to find what's a like good camera distance, or change some other values. Then we're not doing drag fault 4, we're doing drag fault, and then we do camera. You know, now you have cool. That's because I didn't make it static. So now, if you need to sort of edit a variable and you want to test different ranges, then this is perfect. And once you've, the way in GUI that you sort of can conceptually view it is that they sort of create your GUI per frame and then tears everything down, which is why you are able to sort of write this very sort of procedural way, or more imperative way of structuring your UI, which, at least in my mind, reads very easily. Like it's just a bunch of if statements, and then you get a lot of functionality. So you know, create tools based on these, and you'll see here, and if we go to the GFX header where I actually do all this introspection stuff, you'll see that most of the code that I'm doing is just sort of setting up the UI, but it's relatively easy. So I like create collapsing headers, which I mainly do because it looks nice. And what you'll do then is that we're sort of creating these. Let's see if we actually show the shader. So you know, creating these collapsing headers is all the functionality you need to get sort of this that you're actually opening and closing, sort of something going on beneath. So you get these like child views, and similarly we sort of set up collapsing headers for the uniforms, etc., etc. And then like a bunch of stuff is going on there that's just to get stuff to look nice. But like getting out the colors, for instance, getting the whole sort of color picker, the really advanced one, is just like that. That's just, you know, calling ImGUI color edit with where you want the values stored, and then certain flags to ensure that you, for sort of configuring what sort of color output or color pickers you want. So yeah. This also means that these sort of things work it's really modular in how you want your styling. So I've done, so far I've tried to implement the introspection stuff so that it doesn't really affect, or so that you have the ability to change them however you want. So for instance, if we do like ImGUI begin tab, I hope it's tab bar. Python. So if we run it now, you'll see that if we run it now, you'll see that I sort of added tabs on top of here, and then we can do all the programs in here, and we can sort of extend that to say that, hey, we want, for instance, all the programs and all the VAOs in different tabs. So then we can take both of these to sort of drag them up here. And remove that. So yeah, now you can see we suddenly have two tabs where, you know, we can put stuff and still everything sort of works. And at least in my opinion, or in my case, this is one of the few libraries that I've actually worked with that sort of just works the way it's expected as well. So you know, now you've seen that it's easy to set up different layouts also around the code, the UI code that I gave you. So look into this and look into how to use it for yourself to create sort of more tools. As I said, I've written this so that it's as easy as possible to integrate with your existing tools or with sort of your application without putting too much restrictions on your architecture. However, you can obviously take this further. So for instance, in a sort of side project I have, I also allow for runtime compilation of shaders. So instead of just being able to sort of look at this code, then you can actually also go in and delete it, recompile the shader, and then see how that affects your application. So you can sort of do real-time shader or runtime shader editing. So yeah, we would really like to see you actually start using this. We might also look at this as a requirement at some point, maybe. at least get familiar with it and sort of try it out. So the way that you sort of set it up is that when you include it, just as how you had to say that you had GFX implementation before you include the header, you also now have to say, you know, define GFX enable introspection, because this isn't enabled by default, because it sort of depends on ImGUI, etc. And if people don't have that installed, then I don't want to mess with their programs. But preferably try to, you know, download ImGUI and play around with this, and also tell me when this inevitably breaks, because it probably will. We've already found some bugs in it. So we, for instance, found that if you're using, so this tool is supposed to support OpenGL 4.1, because that's the highest we can go. That sort of works with everyone. So we have found issues that if people are using calls from later OpenGL versions, that doesn't sort of manipulate the state in the way that I expect in my tools, then it won't work properly. So please, if you find any issues, post it as an issue on the on GitLab, and then if I have the time, I'll look into fixing it. Also, if you want extra functionality, then you're more than welcome to try to implement that yourself and create pull requests, etc. Just sort of try to stick with the existing style of the code base. So yeah, we have support for editing different types of uniforms, so floats, vectors of floats, matrices in 2, 3, and 4 dimensions. I've not implemented sort of non-symmetric, I guess is the best way to say it. Matrices, yes, like 2.3 matrices, etc., etc. They're not supported yet. But other than that, most things should hopefully be implemented, or most things that you need. So again, please be on the lookout for stuff that doesn't work. And then if it's within scope, then we'll fix it, hopefully. But be aware that there are stuff that, like just with RenderDoc or with any programs that exists ever, there are probably bugs in here. So please tell me if you find them. Cool. I don't think I really have anything more to
Sounds
say.
good. Everything clear? Makes sense to use, perhaps, for your purpose? I mean, the encouragement is implicit, right? So you should probably use it for your own purposes, so build your own debugger around your own more complex programs, right? If you make create assignment 1, or for example, and of course later assignment 2, so it wouldn't hurt to deal with this. Yeah, and it's still subject to discussion here. We need to see how far we implement, we consider this as part of the submittable, but certainly not for the first assignment anyway. But it's just use it for your own sake. It doesn't hurt to know it. In fact, in other related cases right now, bachelor thesis, I've come across students which are precisely using the same tool because they realize, wow, okay, how easy it is to suddenly create a menu in the otherwise totally 3D app or whatever else, and they don't want to waste time dealing with all that menu stuff. You probably in the first assignment will suffer through it anyway, because as you recall, one of the requirements was to have a menu, hint. So you can of course do that manually or find other solutions of addressing it, or this may be just a very sensible pathway, right? Quite straightforward. And last but not least, of course, as usual in life, we give you marks for stuff, but how relevant that is in life is the question in the end. So, but if what Per-Morten says is true and it's actually used by game studios, it's probably a good investment on your part to know about this framework in the first place, right? Irrespective of this course. So it's a good opportunity perhaps to try it out. And since GFX is freely available and so on, or Sparrow is openly available, it's very easy to inspect and to copy and to learn from it right now, right? So it's a good opportunity.
Also the ImGUI headers themselves, most of the documentation exists within the imgui.cpp file. where it's like some programmers guides, etc., etc. But what they really want you to do is to go and read in the IMGUI demo window. That's sort of, go and look at the demo window that I showed off. All that code is open source, so just go and sort of read through it, like how is everything implemented. How did they sort of create checkboxes, for instance? You can find like all of those examples within there, and you can sort of on like the website or the GitHub is really sort of easy to read, and it shows like a lot of examples of how easy it is to set up stuff and the result that you get on the outside, or what you get when you're finished. You can see it like it has bindings to like an insane amount of languages and frameworks. So you can use this in Go as well, or D, or C#, etc., or Swift, or you can use it with like STL, Ogre, etc. And here you can see what people have actually sort of made with IMGUI, and it gets pretty advanced pretty fast. Like whole in-game editors and profilers. This is all the windows from the demo window. Profilers, and you can see at the end here who's supporting this library, so like Blizzard, Media Molecule, those sort of people. So I would say that this is well worth your time to get into.
Cool. Any more thoughts, questions?
How is the first assignment going, by the way? Any progress?
Well,
Yeah.
Sorry.
I've loaded the level. I've added the collision for the player and the boxes. That's it.
Okay.
Have people registered on the form on GitLab?
Yep.
On the wiki pages?
Do that early and often, because then at least we see how many people we're expecting to submit in the first place. And it freaks us out slightly less though if we see that some people actually committing to submitting something, else it looks quite empty and scary. Point is, you can of course edit this any time, right? So we try to avoid this explicit working against the deadline kind of thing. So just put it in early, and since you then provide the repo, you just blindly work on your assignment. Don't need to worry about the explicit submission anymore, right? So
should the repo be on GitLab, or can we use
anywhere? It needs to be public. Well, if on GitLab, it can of course be somewhat private, right? Because you could invite the members here. But in principle, open.
Does it say anywhere? You said registering.
Yeah.
On the
Oh yeah, it's in assignment 1
Group
allocation.
It should be
yeah.
linked from the assignment itself.
Okay.
And some people did already. There you go. Yeah.
2 groups?
2
Yeah.
groups.
Go. Be bold. It's a bit redundant seemingly, but the reason is it's just for our simplicity, because we then can organize this by username as opposed to groups, right? So we can assign you individually the marks that you get as part of this group assignment. So it's a bit of copy and pasting, but I think that shouldn't be a problem. It hasn't been a problem in the past, so and it's an opportunity to learn Markdown anyway. You had something to say. Cool. Well, if there are no more questions, do you have any? No.
Yeah.
I think that's.
Just one more for me.
Yep.
Again, if you find issues with GFX,
Yeah.
like put them here and mark them as GFX.
Label them. Use
label
labels.
them.
Yeah. Also, in general, in terms of the issues, use labels. It really helps, right? So we see quite clearly what is related to the assignment, or the assignment and GFX, or only GFX, and so on, right? So here use combos from it, because that makes it much more valuable having this as a kind of mega FAQ, if you like, right? So because you also, for your own sake, sometimes you may come. So some of our students are really ahead, right, in terms of having some graphics background, actually exploring stuff. And some of the issues may just be finished and closed. Right now we have kind of a convention to leave them somewhat open, but also have a look at the closed issues, or rather all issues, then you can actually see everything that has been posted in the past. And you can easily search that by label and, or of course, by string search, right? So, yeah, make use of it. It makes it a lot easier when, and graphics is usually the course with a large number of issues compared to other courses.
And tomorrow's lab is debugging.
Yeah, so for those of you who didn't sort of get that, tomorrow will be an interesting lab because the previous year's lab had an issue.
Yeah.
And
it's broken.
we don't know it's broken, and we haven't managed to find that issue yet. And we thought that since you now all are sort of experts in debugging graphics applications, that's tomorrow's lab. We're just sort of going to try and brute force this and see if people can find the bug, and hopefully we can fix that so that next year don't have that lab.
So anything, you get some experience using the different tools shown up today.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And again, since we don't know exactly what the issue is either, it means that you won't be relying on us to find the issue, because we have no clue.
Well,
so
but
no solution provided tomorrow.
Yeah.
that's true, right? But there's also no path dependence, right? So if you don't finish that lab, that doesn't mean that you are screwed entirely. Yeah, that's an interesting one indeed. Yes. Cool. I think then we are good, right? So with respect to the evaluation people, it would be kind if you could stay here, and then we can do our evaluation early already. There's no point dragging it out until 4 only. Yeah. And the rest of you is free to roam or do whatever you want. Enjoy the sunshine. It's scarce.
Alright, I'm stopping the stream.
Get your vitamin D, so you don't need to drink too much.
I pills for that.